Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Inquisitive Finance. My name is Rafael Negron, and today I'm going to continue in the series that I've been talking about different income brackets. So, if you remember from 2 days ago, I started talking about people under the 60K mark. Yesterday, I talked about people in the income bracket of 60K to 120K. And today, we're going to move into the high income professional income bracket, which is anywhere from around 120K to 250K. So now we're definitely reaching a new rank of individual that is making a lot of money. And at this stage, it's always sort of piqued my interest to understand exactly what their responsibilities are, what their money priorities are, and what their saving style shifts to. You can imagine, or if you remember in that first video for people under 60K, they had a very reactive saving style. In the video from yesterday, it moved into a more proactive saving style. So when we get to that at the end of today's video, let's see exactly how individuals in this income bracket sort of think. You can see I'm trying something a little bit newer today. Really, the only difference is my background here. I thought maybe having the curtains open would add a little bit more ambiance. You can also, I guess, see a little bit more of the office there. You see that I have my, where am I putting here? I got my whiteboard there, which I've been thinking recently of maybe setting up like another tripod. And whenever I want to show more context, like by hand, it'd be kind of cool to have like a whiteboard view. So I don't know, maybe another video, but we'll certainly get there when the time comes. And of course, I have my favorite guest here, which I won't say his name because if I do, it might rile him up. So if you do hear him making noise or his ears flapping, just know that he means the best and with the best intentions. Okay, so let's get right into it. This time, what I'm gonna do is I didn't really look up anything beforehand. I want this to feel very organic, so let's just go for it and let's just talk, through everything point by point. So here we have this notepad I created. Let me see if I can just zoom in a little bit here just to make it a little bit easier for everyone to read here. So you can see here we have the stage 3 high income professional, 120K to 250K. So let's go into the first responsibility here. So the first responsibility is you now face invisible expenses, higher taxes, lifestyle inflation, social pressure. You can remember from the video that we looked at yesterday, I was looking at how taxes are actually calculated. And like I said, and I still feel a little bit embarrassed to admit it, I actually didn't know how taxes were calculated even a couple of years ago, probably like right when I started my career. I always thought that that tax bracket was applied to your entire income, but it's only different, let's say, buckets. But we can remind ourselves of that again. So, how are taxes calculated? Just to remind everyone, so this is the federal income tax rates and brackets. This is directly on the IRS website. Let me actually, well, I guess I don't really need to zoom out. The only reason I'm saying this is because I see I see my view on the screen, and I just want to make sure the view of myself doesn't take up too much of the screen. But we have the different tax brackets here, and I think this graphic right here makes it very clear exactly what's happening, right? So some percentage of your income is taxed at 10%. The next percentage of your income is taxed at 12%. So the more money you make, the more you're being taxed on different parts of your income. So going back to this first responsibility, these invisible expenses, things like higher taxes really start to play a larger effect the more money that we're making, the more money that we're talking about. Also, we have things like lifestyle inflation, which before this video, I was thinking about it, and it reminds me of this thing which I thought maybe it was just called like the mean bell curve. And it's not quite a one-to-one representation, but if we look at this picture, and let me see if I can move my screen here because I don't want, I think you guys might be able to see though, and you guys are probably used to seeing this meme already, but it looks like pretty much on each side, from what I understand, the people on either side of the bell curve are sort of maybe stable and they're similar, but it's really the people in the middle that are in this weird area from like, I don't know, 85 to 115 of maybe people that are just thinking about it the wrong way. And the way that I thought of this is your lifestyle inflation and even social pressure. I feel like when you're in the middle, you don't really feel it that much, but when you're in the bottom of it, and I talked about this in a separate video, I feel like when you're in the bottom income bracket, like you don't make a lot of money, but there's a lot of people that don't make a lot of money and don't know how to manage their money. And there's this illusion that they have a lot of money because maybe they're posting on social media, maybe they're driving fancy cars, but in reality they're rentals. So it happens a lot in these lower income brackets from what I've seen. But then I feel like it also happens in the upper income brackets, right? Where now you're around a lot of people that have money, and maybe it's no longer an illusion, maybe it's a real thing, so you feel the pressure a little bit differently. Remember, in that first income bracket, it was more like you want to try and fit in, even though you know you can't. And in the upper income bracket, it's like you want to try and fit in. You know you can, but now you're battling with that pressure of, I don't really want to because it's probably just not a good idea. I want to hold on to the money that I've made. So here in the middle, if we look at this image, I feel like the people in the middle and that middle income bracket that we talked about yesterday, maybe that 60K to 120K, are people that are stable, right? They don't really care about these pressures because you're making more money, but not so much money. So I think you fall into the middle nicely. So I thought that was kind of interesting, kind of a funny graphic to show there. So lifestyle inflation, social pressure, these are things that we talked about. The next bullet point here is your financial mistakes cost more. Let's talk about bad debt, right? I think that the higher like you can't get into so much debt when you don't have a lot of income, right? And sometimes people without income don't even have any credit to begin with, right? They might have debts from other places, but they don't even like carry a balance. They're even just trying to build that debt to begin with. They don't really have to worry about too much about bad debt, which by the way, if you haven't already sort of figured out how to build credit. This is actually a video I also made. I know I've been hinting at a lot of videos, but let me see if I can find it here. I talked about this video here. So no credit, here's where to start. It actually walks you through ways of building credit if you're someone that's never had any credit. So interesting video for those of you out there that have no credit. Things like secured credit cards for people with absolutely no credit. But you can imagine that when you're in these upper echelons of this money, you're now making a lot more money. So the purchases that you can make can potentially get you into worse debt. You buy fancier cars, you buy fancier clothes, maybe you're opening up more credit cards here and there. Like I can say for sure that the higher money I make, rather the more money I make, I have probably opened up more credit cards. Now I do well by them and I pay them off every single month exactly like you should, but not everyone does that, right? Most people don't really know how to manage their money. So it's just something I really want you to pay attention to. Then we have things like poor investing. I also think it kind of goes in the same way here. The more money you make, the higher, I think statistically, the higher the odds are that you're probably going to want to make maybe some bad investments. Maybe your buddy gives you a stock pick. He calls you up and says, "Hey, I think you should invest in this." Maybe you're going to follow something on Wall Street Bets, your favorite Twitter user. You're just going to invest in whatever they make. And because you have that money, you might be more willing to part with that money, right? Someone in the lower income bracket or maybe in the middle income bracket, they're maybe making a little bit of money, but they want to keep more of it. They want to figure out how to make it grow. But once you start making more of this money, you start thinking, well, I have disposable income. I'll just make an investment and whatever happens, happens. And sometimes these things can be bad investments. And instead of sticking to tried and true things like an index fund, tracking the S&P 500, right? Or like a nice solid growth ETF, you might be investing into more risky assets. Just again, something to be very aware of. These things probably are happening to people in this high income professional income bracket. And then you have things like undersaving. I think undersaving comes into play here as well because you can imagine, again, because your expenses are higher, you have more assets, so you have more things to worry about. If you haven't saved an adequate amount of money, you might be in a situation where you need an emergency, or rather, you need an emergency fund, but you don't have that savings to cover it. And this happens why? Because you're making more financial mistakes because you have more money. It's really true what they say, more money is more problems, right? So I just think that's the nature of it, but everyone has a different way of thinking about money, and I'm not necessarily saying that everyone in this bracket is the same way. And then finally, the last responsibility we have here is you may have dependents or want to buy real estate, invest, or start a business. This is a new responsibility that maybe you hadn't thought about in the lower income bracket or the middle income bracket. You have more money right now. Odds are you're probably older, maybe in your 40s or 50s. You definitely might have some dependents. You might want to look into buying real estate. Maybe you have a primary home, but you want to now invest in an investment home or maybe a rental property, a duplex, triplex, so on and so forth. I'm a little bit interested in real estate, so I kind of, I try to learn about this whenever I can. And frankly, I would love to be a landlord someday. Definitely when I decide to move out of this home to start a family, I would love to make this home a rental property. And probably I'll take you all on that journey and what that means for me. So stay tuned if that's something you guys want to know about. You might look into more things like investing, which I think at the lower and middle income tiers you probably have already been doing. And finally, you might do something like start a business. For example, I love to eat, and I've always thought it might be kind of cool to start like a franchise with like Chick-fil-A or something like this or Taco Bell. One of my dad's best friends actually opened up a Taco Bell right on the lot of a Firestone that he owns. So he's actually making a lot of money from that. And he has some troubles and there's certainly some difficulties with owning it, but I guess it just comes with people that are making more money. So maybe that's something that you want to do. So two things before we move on. I first want to see what percentage of people in the United States are making between 120 and 250. So yesterday, remember, between 60K and 120 was about 70, or not 70, 27%. Let's see what it is for 250K. Okay, so based on 2023 data, approximately 16.6% of households in the United States had an annual income between 120,000 and 250,000. It's important to note that this figure represents household income, which differs from individual income. So, does it give us any data for individuals? This is household income, okay? But I think this is good because probably a lot of us are factoring household income to begin with. I mean, if you're someone making this amount of money as an individual, you're definitely in the upper tiers of things. But if anything, let's say that these videos are geared more towards families of at least two, and this is your household income, maybe you and your spouse, your partner, your friend, however your situation is set up, two or more people in the same household making this amount of money. Okay, so 16%. You can see that number now is getting lower, right? I think, well, let's go back. What percent of people in the United States make less than or 60K? I just want to look at the percentages as we've been going, right? So we have here, as of late 2024 and early 2025, approximately 50% of individual full-time workers and 45% of households in the United States earn less than 60,000. So we started at 45% with that low income bracket. The middle income bracket was, what was it, 27%? And now we're looking into 16%. So just like I said yesterday, the higher the income bracket, the less the percentage. And of course, it makes absolute sense. It's a lot more difficult to get into these income brackets. And that's why it's so fascinating to understand the responsibilities and the money priorities that some of these individuals have to think about. So with that being said, let's start now going into the money priorities. So we have something like tax efficiency. Now, I've already covered this in depth as best as I could. If you all know, this channel is one where I'm learning a lot alongside you all. It's one thing for me to, you know, talk about things that I already know, but I think it's also something for me to just like quickly learn about something and share my new knowledge with you and hopefully learn from the community and sort of have friendly debates here and there and whatever I can do to grow my own knowledge and share that with you. So we can see here it's talking about things like utilizing a pre-tax 401k, backdoor Roth, HSA, ESPP, and tax efficient funds and taxable accounts. The only one here that I haven't talked about in depth, which I guess two of them really, are backdoor Roths and ESPP. So three things I want to mention here. The first thing, if you're new to my channel, I've actually made a video about this already, which actually happens to be one of my most popular ones. So thanks everyone for making that happen. It's this one right here about where to invest for maximum tax efficiency. Roth versus IRA versus brokerage versus HSA. A phenomenal video if you want to know not only, it's not just about what stocks or funds you pick, it's about where you actually invest them to avoid things like tax drag and make sure that you really have the majority of the money working for you and you're not getting taxed and paying someone else or something else when you can just be keeping most of that money. The second thing here is talk about a backdoor Roth, right? So a lot of individuals, I think there is a limit. Let's say what is the income limit for a Roth IRA? So it says for the 2025 tax year, your ability to contribute to a Roth IRA is determined by your modified adjusted gross income and filing status. A single filer can contribute the full amount if their MAGI, so again, modified adjusted gross income, is less than 150,000. So if you're making less than this, you can directly go and contribute inside of your Roth IRA. Now remember, it's not enough to just contribute into there. You can imagine you have something like Fidelity, you open it up, you transfer it from your bank directly to your Roth IRA. You don't want to just have the money sitting there. You actually need to invest it. I think some people get confused about this because, like, for example, an HSA, you could theoretically just transfer the money into the HSA and let it sit there, but you also want to invest the money. That's where you get the real power of these investment accounts, right? Roth IRA, HSA. So make sure you're going and investing that money. The limit is $7,000 for this year. Next year, it's going to be increased to $7,500. But this is exactly what a Roth IRA is. It's the income limit. So with a backdoor Roth IRA, people that are making more than this, let's say modified adjusted gross income, they can do something that's known as a backdoor Roth, which involves contributing first to a traditional 401k and then moving that money into your Roth 401k, okay, or rather your Roth IRA. Now you need to be a little bit careful because I think the form is called a Form 8606. Let me see, Form 8606. Non-deductible contributions to traditional IRAs and distributions from traditional. So about Form 8606, non-deductible IRAs. If I remember correctly, you use it to report the money that's already been taxed going into your traditional IRA because that money's already been taxed. You don't want to be taxed again on the money that you move from your traditional IRA to your Roth IRA. This is something that Fidelity will not remind you about, so it's up to you to decide. I actually have a reminder on my phone to already do this, so I can make sure that next year when it comes time to do my taxes, I can already have this form ready and filled out and just ready to go. So something to keep in mind if you're doing the backdoor Roth conversion. I didn't know about this. I just read about it. So I'm teaching you all now so you don't make that mistake. And finally, last one here, which is a very important one, is of course ESPP, probably one of my favorite ones, the Employee Stock Purchase Program. To be completely transparent, my company used to have this when I first started. And pretty much what it is for a certain amount of time, you can contribute some percentage of your salary to like a bucket. At the end of this period of time, your company will then buy funds of the stock, buy stock at a discount using the amount that you got. So a lot of times it's like 10% or 15% off. So you can imagine if you're buying stock at 10 or 15% off, it's an immediate rate of return. Unless the company tanks and it's actually worse than the discount, that's the only time you lose money. But sometimes companies will have an even better feature. I think it's called something like look back, where they will pick the stock at the different points, so the beginning of the period and the back at the end of the period. They'll pick the lower of the two and then apply the discount to that. So we're talking about even more money at a discount. You're buying stock of this company at a discount and you're just investing it. Most of the time people just sell it off. That way you don't have to worry about any sort of gains. You just sell it immediately as you get it. You don't keep it, you don't do anything like this, and you can reinvest it if you want. Use it for something else. Maybe use it for like a house project or something like this. That's what I used to do when I had it. But that's something that people typically do. And I was thinking about making a video on this as well at some point, and I probably will. So a lot of really cool things that we're learning about here, tax efficiency. The next thing that we have is strategic investing. So index funds for growth, dividend funds for income, and bonds for balance. Now, recently I saw a video from this YouTuber. He calls himself Professor G. He talked a little bit about why he wants to get away from bonds. And to be completely honest, at this moment, I don't know too much about bonds. I mean, I have a high level idea of how they work, and I know that the closer you get to retirement, this is something that you want to have to protect your wealth. However, I feel like some people are now maybe going a little bit away from bonds, more into dividend investments for income versus, bonds for this type of balance. Maybe they're doing a little bit of both. This is something I definitely want to learn more about. But I think what this point means to say is at this point, you are figuring out exactly where your investments should be allocated for strategic investing, right? You want your index funds for growth, literally just what it says here. You want to make sure everything's in balance so you have some growth, but you're also protecting your wealth. A little bit of the same as what we saw yesterday. And I think this will be common the more and more we go, because again, the more money you have, the more that you want to ensure that you are protecting it and still growing it, but you're still getting a little bit of all these different buckets: income from dividends, index funds for growth, and then you're using that bonds. For a lot of people, something that helps out a lot is using something like a target date fund. So let me just look this up right here to explain what that is. So a target date funds works by automatically adjusting its asset allocation or glide path from riskier assets like stocks to safer assets like bonds as the target retirement year approaches. So you can imagine in the beginning when you start investing, a target date fund might have you, 70% domestic and 30% bonds. And the closer that you start getting to retirement, that might switch to something like 50% bonds, 50% domestic, or 60% bonds, 40% domestic. I don't know if the ratios are actually like that, but you can see that it starts going more to bonds. Now, the reason that I actually got away from my target date fund when I opened up my 401k with my company, they automatically having the target date fund, was because, frankly, for me, international stocks don't make so much sense anymore. And this is sort of the education I've been hearing and reading about in the finance world, where back in the day, if you wanted to do international trading, you really had to be in that country to be able to do it and set up shop there. You needed like a brick and mortar type of store, right? But now you no longer need that. Now you can have someone in Florida sitting on their computer, just like me, sell in Australia, sell in India, sell in China, so on and so forth. So it's really a global market. I don't think it's so worth for me to have 30% in international. And frankly, I feel like if the US were to do so bad, I'm not sure if the shift in international would be so much to save me. Like I think so much of the world economy is based on the US economy that if we're doing bad, probably the rest of the world is as well. So for me, I'm all in on the US. I have faith in the US and I want to put everything in there because I believe in the US market. So that's why I got away from target date fund and just switched to something like FXAIX and Fidelity, and I'm going all in on S&P 500 for the US. So with that being said, let's go to the next one here. So at this stage, you want to max out all tax advantage accounts before excess investing. I think the order to do that, and different people will tell you different things. I think at a high level, just focus on maxing out your 401k if you can. So remember, get that match to get the free money. And then you probably want to even focus on your Roth IRA because remember, your Roth IRA, you won't be taxed on. So you really want to use the Roth IRA as like a supercharged account where you can put investments, I think personally, that are maybe a little bit riskier that can maybe get you a higher return. So all that growth that you get is tax free when you retire. So I think you should do, take your match, go to the Roth IRA, go back to your 401k and max that out so you get the annual employee limit for the year. And then after that, you can start looking at something like an HSA. I think once you have all those three maxed out, then you can start looking into maybe like a taxable brokerage account or maybe something like a 529 plan for your kids if you have any, looking for college, so on and so forth. But at this stage in your career, I think you can probably afford to start maxing all of them. And even after that, some companies might offer things like post tax contributions where you can continue even further. I think the limit, let me see, there is a limit to this. So there's a limit to everything, right? Post tax contributions limit. I think it's like, let's see, yeah, total combined limit 70,000. So for the 2025 tax year, the IRS has set the following limits for 401k and other defined contribution plans: 70,000. The total after-tax contribution limit for 401k plan is not a single fixed dollar amount. Instead, is determined by subtracting your pre-tax, Roth, and employer contributions from the overall defined contribution plans limit set by the IRS. So these after tax, you can even go higher. So an after tax contribution is a voluntary deposit made to your 401k with money you have already paid taxes on. It differs from a Roth 401k contribution, which is an elective deferral. After tax contributions are primarily used by high income earners who have already maxed out their regular pre tax and Roth contributions for the year. So, very key words there. You need to do the maxing out of your regular pre-tax and Roth contributions. And some of you might know this as the mega backdoor Roth, where you can continue going even higher. So these high income professionals are definitely doing more than just the standard classic maxing out the 401k, Roth, and HSA. They're going beyond doing things like this mega backdoor Roth to ensure they have the most amount of money working for them. However, one thing to note about this is you are still sort of locking your money in. I believe you still get penalized if you pull this money out before a certain age. Maybe that age is 59 and a half. I'll have to look at it into a little more detail. But even though you can put more of your money into this mega backdoor Roth, you're sort of locking it in. Whereas if you just invest in a taxable brokerage account, you can pull that money out at any time. Obviously, you'll have to pay taxes like capital gains, short term, long term, so on and so forth. But at least your money is more free, more liquid than having to pull it out of something like a mega backdoor Roth. Okay, so continuing on here, we have estate planning. Now, this is an area that, frankly, I'm also not very interested in, and I wanted to take the time to go through it a little bit now. So, for estate planning, we have things like wills, beneficiaries, basic trust setup if needed, right? So, what exactly is a will? I always hear about it. I always hear people reading about it. I've seen one recently, unfortunately, but let's try to learn a little bit more what it is about. So, what is a will? A will is a legal document that specifies how a person's assets will be distributed and who will become the guardian of their minor children after their death. Okay, it makes a lot of sense. And now I understand exactly why someone at this level might want to have a will. You have all these assets and you want to make sure that these assets go to the right people once you're no longer here. And of course, the more money you make, the more assets you have, the more you want to ensure that you leave a legacy behind. So yes, I do think having a will is a very important thing and probably something that people in this income bracket might be thinking about. Something that I always think about, which is very interesting, is in this world of social media, TikTok, YouTube, so on and so forth, you have people that are like in their teens making crazy amounts of money. I'm talking about there's teens that are millionaires already. Do you think teens are actually filling out wills? They have so much money. Are they doing this? Is someone else managing this for them? I'm not really sure. Maybe you know. If you know in the comments, let me know. It'd be very interesting to find out. Maybe you're someone that's already making millions. Let me know if this is someone, if you're of the younger age group, have you filled out a will for yourself? Then, of course, we have things like beneficiaries, which how is that different from a will? Because I do have some beneficiaries. So, how is a beneficiary different from a will? Is that even the right question to ask? So, the key difference is that a beneficiary designation on assets like life insurance or retirement accounts will supersede a will, meaning those specific assets pass directly to the named beneficiary and bypass the will's instructions and the probate process. So exactly what does that mean? Will only directs assets that are part of the probate's estate. Any asset with a beneficiary designation, like a life insurance policy or 401k, will go to that beneficiary regardless of what the will says. Okay, so I guess it supersedes. It's even more important than a will, and it sounds a little bit more directed at a person. right? So it doesn't matter what the will says. If you have a beneficiary set up, all that applies to that specific person listed as a beneficiary. And then we have a trust. So again, let's go back here. What is a trust fund? By the way, what I'm doing here live, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to do it with you all, is exactly how I learn about these things, right? I find something that I don't know, I look up a quick definition, I do just a quick read on it, and then I'm able to sort of learn about it and maybe start talking about it. But I think that's kind of the cool thing about the internet, right? Essentially, a trust, sometimes referred to as a trust fund, is a formal transfer of assets via a legal document to a trustee or multiple trustees with instructions to hold the asset for the benefit of others. So, I would love to go here, man. How does a trust fund work? Okay, so a trust fund is just an investment account that allows the beneficiary, you, to receive money from the account, usually 5% of the value, and additional distributions for health, education, maintenance, and supports. It does not affect your Social Security in any way. The fund will earn an interest whatever it's invested in. It can be invested in stocks, bonds, cash, or alternatives. There's not enough information here to tell you much more. Okay, well, I think that sounds about right. And now I understand why, there's that thing of like the trust fund kid that maybe gets all his money. So, someone set up a trust for them when they were younger and now they have all this money that they benefit from. But it's a weird place to be in, right? Because if you are someone that's making so much money, like if you're making so much money and you have a great family, everything's going well, money's never really been an issue, why wouldn't you want to set up a trust fund for your kids or your family, right? I think it's more important to teach them how to use that money and not to spoil them, instead of just not having the resource for them at all. So I think trust fund kids get a bad name. Some of them definitely are spoiled, but I'm sure some of them are still getting that money and they're not even making a big deal about it. And they're still living their lives in a normal way. They just have access to some resources, which I think is fine. If someone's parents decided to do the duty and do their work and do their best and set this up for their kids, I think that's an honorable thing to do. So that's just my opinion. You make of it whatever you want. Finally, here we have explore passive income. So, rental property, side business, or digital products. People in this income bracket might be thinking about this, right? Like I said earlier, if you have like a primary home, your primary investment, you might want to start having investment properties. You might want to start renting some properties out, maybe buy some duplexes, triplexes, get involved in real estate. You have the money to be able to do this now. And this is why, if we go back up here, these invisible expenses, these financial mistakes. Imagine you buy a house that loses money. You couldn't have bought that house in the lower income bracket, but now you have more money to do so. But when you have more money, not only can you make more money, you can lose more money. So, a very important lesson there that I think everyone needs to pay attention to. You can have things like side businesses or digital products. Everyone now is in the digital product space. You have websites like Shopify, for example, that make it literally 30 seconds for you to set up a shop online. You can start selling products. You can do things like drop shipping, all that stuff. So many people are doing it. So many people are becoming incredibly successful with it. So, it's not really just limited to these income brackets anymore, but certainly someone with this amount of money might fund this for themselves and fuel the beginning of a new business like this, a side business, if you will. Okay, finally, we're at the last point here, the saving style. So again, that lower income bracket was very reactive. That middle income bracket was very proactive. Now for this last one, what is the saving style? Well, it says here, you move from saving what you can to allocating deliberately across goals. For example, you have X% of money for retirement, you have Y% for taxable growth, and you have Z% for future home or businesses, right? So it's not just like we had the reactive, we had the proactive. I'm going to save in some buckets, but now you're being very deliberate. I want to save this amount for retirement. I know exactly how much I need for retirement. I know exactly how much I want for retirement, so I'm going to do this. I want to save this much for taxable growth. I need this much to be able to grow. I've done the math myself. I know exactly how much I need for this. I have Z% for a future home or business. I know exactly how much I need to save for that down payment, closing costs, hidden fees. This is exactly how much I need to save, how much of a percentage of my income I need to dedicate to this. I know exactly where I want to put it, what investment account, so on and so forth. You're being very deliberate across all your accounts, how much money you want to save. And here, a common goal is to save or invest anywhere from 30 to 40% of your income, depending on your expenses, okay? So again, if you're at let's say you're at what's an easy number here? Let's say you are making $180,000. Okay, if you want to save about one third of that, which is going to be 60,000, so let's say 30, it's going to be a little less. I don't know, 55,000 or something like this. This is going to be gross. I want you to save or invest at least that amount of money every single, let's say for the year. That's how much you want to have saved. And that's probably a really good benchmark. Obviously, some people have done more, some people have done less. It really just depends on where you are in your life and what it is that you want to do. Again, I can't stress this enough. I feel like I've said that so often, but really it is just that simple. So anyway, we talked a lot today. I tried a little something different today where I didn't really look up any of these articles beforehand. I wanted this to feel a little bit more organic, a little bit more live, if you will. And I hope, like always, all of you learned a little bit something new and saw a little bit into the mind, let's say, of someone that is in this high professional income bracket. This, what was it again? What was the range for this? 120 to 250K. What is it that they're thinking of? What are they prioritizing? What are their responsibilities? We can see that really at all the income brackets, there are always problems. Something very, very important I want you to pay attention to. Every single bracket has different problems. Some are focused on just paying the absolute basics. Others are more focused on making sure they don't make any bad decisions and protecting their wealth and making sure their money goes to the right people once they're no longer here. And I think all those problems across all income brackets are valid for you at that point in your life. So don't let anyone tell you that your problems are not valid, okay? They are valid, they are very unique to you, and they should be acknowledged, let's say. All right. So, with all that being said, I hope you guys very much enjoyed the video today. If you like this type of content, we're going to probably finish up tomorrow or maybe the day after. Maybe I'll combine both of these last income brackets into one video. And if you like this type of content, yeah, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. Did you ever know that people in this income bracket are making this? Maybe not. I certainly didn't. So, with all that being said, I will see you all next time and hope you all have a great rest of your day. Later.